Yeah, so we're actually going to stay with the Atlanta Falcons wide receiver group, and we are going to take Julio Jones up against Davante Adams, both elite wide receiver ones in fantasy football for a big piece of their career. I'm going to take the Julio Jones side here. Steph, I know you're a big Davante Adams fan. I'll let you start it off this time. You tell me why you would rather have Davante Adams over Julio Jones in 2020.
My keeper, Davante Adams. I know he finished as a wide receiver 23. He missed 4 weeks with injury, though, so we got to keep some of that, in mind when we're looking at some of these season-long stats. He averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game in standard leagues, which is sixth amongst all wide receivers. What I love about Adams is his target share in that offense. He pretty much is the Green Bay passing attack. We saw that late in the postseason when Green Bay played Seattle. They were just force-feeding Adams, and Rodgers was able to get it to him at will. Had an absolute fantastic game there. He finished 14th with 4 games missed amongst all wide receivers and targets. So still, top-tier level production and target share. Consistently a scoring threat from 2016 to 2018. No one had more touchdown receptions than Adams, outside of Antonio Brown, who was putting up historical level stats there and was like the clear number one. Adams was right behind him. He finished third in red zone receptions in 2019, and in 2018 he was number one. So you have to think if Adams is healthy for a full 16-game season, he's going to be that number one spot. He dominated when he was healthy in 2019. There were questions towards the beginning of the season with new head coach Matt LaFleur. He's going to bring in a Shanahan-style offensive scheme to the Packers, and that passing volume is going to get diminished a little bit. And we did see some of that. But towards the end of the season, that was not a concern for Adams at all. Rodgers targets him a ton. We have Jimmy Graham, who just got released by the Packers. Geronimo Allison's a free agent. Alan Lazard is a free agent. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there with some of the other weapons. If they do bring in one of the names that's been mentioned for the Packers would be Austin Hooper, whether it's him or some other receiving help. To me, I don't see that as a negative for Adams. I see that as just, hey, the offense is going to get better. They're going to be on schedule more often. They're going to be able to push the ball downfield, which just means more touchdowns for Davante Adams. Look at these scores from week 10 on in PPR for Adams. He finished with 18 points, 19 points, 24 points. He had an 8-point game in there and then went right back up, 23, 22, 22 again. That's what you're getting out of Davante Adams. So I'm a huge Adams truther. He might even be my wide receiver 2 for the 2020 season. I'm absolutely all in on him, especially when compared to Julio Jones. But Alex, what's your thought on my Adams takes?
Yeah, he's an elite talent. I love the talent. I think he is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football in 2020. He's a top 8, top 10 guy for me. There's one game in 2019 that specifically stands out. I think they were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and he just absolutely roasted them for 20 yards every time Aaron Rodgers threw him the ball. So he's a guy we know can just absolutely eat on the outside, but something that you have to remember with Davante Adams, he's only been over 1,000 receiving yards one time in his 6-year NFL career. One time. And his best seasons from a fantasy perspective were from 2016 through 2018, and they were very touchdown dependent. 12 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, and 13 touchdowns. And yeah, he's a big red zone threat, but you see what Matt LaFleur is doing with this offense. They seemed very committed to the run, especially inside the 5 and 10 yard line. In 2019, they didn't throw the ball a lot inside that tight of a space. And you could look at that on both sides of the coin and say, okay, maybe that's going to regress positively for Adams, and maybe they'll throw it a little bit more close to the goal line in 2020, and that's where we know that Davante Adams lives. But maybe that's just a Matt LaFleur thing, and he likes to pound the rock into the end zone. So that's something that you just got to keep in mind with Adams. And I think he's an elite receiver, but to me, I'm going with the guy who has gotten it done year in and year out, and you always know he's going to be a top receiver in the league, no questions asked, a top fantasy option, and that is Julio Jones. He was second in the NFL in receiving yards last year in just 15 games, and there's some really interesting stats I was able to find on Julio and just what he's been able to do over the past 6 seasons. He is one of the hands-down best receivers of our generation. If you take his worst season in each stat category over the past 6 seasons, It's 83 receptions is his low in receptions. 1,394 yards is his lowest yardage output, and 3 touchdowns. If you take his lowest season in each category, he would have been wide receiver 12 this year in fantasy football.
Wow.
And over the last 6 years in PPR, he's been wide receiver 3, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 6. So, again, it's like Julio's done it 6 years in a row. That's pretty much guaranteeing a top 8 wide receiver with the upside of a wide receiver 1, of the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. The offense should remain constant in 2020. We know Matt Ryan's going to be the quarterback. Calvin Ridley's emerging on the other side of the ball, which I don't really think takes away from Julio. We saw Julio be really successful back in the day when Roddy White was there. Roddy White kind of passed the torch over to Julio Jones, and I think Ridley's breakout could actually help this Falcons offense as a whole. If we see 6 to 8 touchdowns have been the big thing with Julio Jones, which is kind of the least sticky stat for a wide receiver. That's been his biggest issue, and if we can see 6 to 8 touchdowns from Julio this year, that's a lock for a top 5 performance if he stays healthy at the wide receiver position. If he somehow gets 10 touchdowns in a season, that's when you're looking at Julio Jones and saying, like, he's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. So for me, Julio is just so safe as a top 8 guy as long as he stays healthy. And then you throw in the potential for a big year in the touchdown category, and like your upside is literally wide receiver 1. So I'm going with the guy who's done it before. I hate taking away from Adams and his talent, but there is no way, even though he's a little bit older now, I think he's into his 30s, but Julio Jones is a lock as a wide receiver 1 this season as long as he stays healthy. So give me that all day long.
It's tough, for me to take Julio over Adams with just kind of the way that we've seen the Falcons offense struggle at different times. Even in, the year they made it to the Super Bowl, like we would just see them stall out. And then you look at age, right? Adams is 27, right there in his prime. Julio is 31, aging out. We're seeing him get kind of that ceiling where we see guys start to diminish a little bit. And I just feel like the Falcons haven't figured out a way to fully use Julio in the red zone to this day. This has been like a 5 or 6 year process.
The thing is,
trying to get this man touchdown.
If they haven't figured it out and he's still wide receiver 8 or better the last 6 seasons, that's only good news because there's nowhere to go but up.
That's fair. I mean, you look at 6 touchdowns. Adams had 5 in 3 less games, and so these guys are honestly on just different ends of the coin. What do you value more? Do you value yards and more ways that Julio could just take over a game? We've seen him put up games with over 200 receiving yards, or do you want Adams who could have 3 touchdowns on a blow up day? We are really just splitting hairs here, but 6 touchdowns for Julio. I mean, that's the same with the guys like Rashad Perriman had 6 touchdowns this year. Cole Beasley had 6 touchdowns this year. Adams is putting up double-digit touchdowns year in, year out. I absolutely love it. And you're right. Maybe the volume does come down a little bit with LaFleur. I just think what we saw, we have a large enough sample size now with LaFleur to say, oh, those touchdowns aren't just going to disappear. I lock him in for 8 to 12 touchdowns in 2020. But, yeah, this is one that it could go either way. And we put out a poll on Twitter. Shout out to everybody who's following us on Twitter at Double Move Sports. We put out a poll with some dynasty and redraft questions about these two guys, and it was pretty even across the board. You had your Julio truthers, you had your Adams truthers, you had everybody in the middle. So this is a fun one to debate. I'd love to keep this one going. Maybe we'll have to bring this one up again closer to draft season.